Greetings, YouTube. Last night, my wife and I watched Ender's Game with Harrison Ford, and I thought it was an interesting addition to the book, but on its own, I felt that it failed. It was too short. It didn't go into enough details of the book, and it completely missed the political lives of Ender's siblings. I should say that even though I am not a fan of Orson Scott Card as a person, I think that Ender's Game is probably the best piece of science fiction ever written. And what I loved about the political structure between the two siblings, and this is something I did not really grok until laying in bed last night, not sleeping, running this through my head. I've been awake for about 5 minutes. Is that the conservative brother and the compassionate liberal sister, as a game, take the position that each could fake the other's political belief and have other people buy it. And they do it, and they become world famous for their false political beliefs. Orson Scott Card himself is a profoundly socially conservative person. Socially conservative. He's also politically conservative, but Card is a member of the board of directors of the National Organization of Marriage, a socially conservative organization that wants to prevent Americans from having marital equality. He is a horrible, horrible person, and while I have deep sympathy for him as a human being, I find his positions, political and social, to be morally reprehensible and repugnant. And Orson Scott Card really believes that he could fake a liberal progressive worldview. He believes that. So I found myself thinking about this lying in bed last night, not sleeping. And he's wrong. See, both American conservatism and liberal progressive worldviews are about structure and constraint, but they differ in how they apply those things. The liberal progressive worldview, and I'm speaking of as a socialist, as someone that believes in socialism. As a side note, I believe in democracy. I call myself a democratic socialist because I believe in the institution of democracy. I'm indifferent to what other people may view that word, that phrase, democratic socialist, to mean. I am not a social democrat because I vote Democrat and I'm registered as a Democrat. I do so because I think that they are the best shot I have of preventing the most dangerous political party in American history from having power, which is the Republicans and their allies, Tea Party and libertarians. So whatever other people use the phrase democratic socialist to mean I'm indifferent to. I use it because I am a socialist that believes in democracy. And saying that as a statement is long and awkward, so I just say democratic socialist. Me, as a socialist, believes that to have political freedom, we must have economic constraints. And these economic constraints are structures that prevent economic exploitation of the masses. And in doing so, in making sure that the masses are economically protected from exploitation, we then receive in return political freedom. Because I see these things as a sliding scale, and the more constraint we have on economic structures, the greater we have of political freedoms. And the opposite is true. That when we take off the governors of the economic structures, political freedoms disappear. So what do I mean by this? Social conservatives in America, political conservatives in America, and again I'm discussing American conservatism here, have convinced their masses, their base, that if there is unfettered economic freedom, that there will also be unfettered political freedom. And it's convinced them that the individual, me and you, have equal standing to a corporation. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that there's a scale. We're talking metaphorical, obviously. On one side of the scale, I'm standing on one balance pan. On the other balance pan is the Ford Motor Company. Now, is that going to be equal? Am I, as a free economic entity in a truly free market economy, equal to the Ford Motor Company? Do I possess the same economic and political power as the Ford Motor Company? Of course I don't. Without any economic constraints, I never will. The Ford Motor Company will always be able to economically and politically exploit me, because we will never, ever be on equal terms. Not in a million years. And the only way that I can ever hope to counterbalance that scale is by adding my fellow citizens to it. If we join together as we the people, and then we can balance that scale. And that's why I'm a socialist. Because that scale will never be balanced if each individual person is viewed as an economic entity on their own without any economic structure and constraints involved. Whereas, if we have constraints on economic structures, minimum wages, maximum wages, which would be lovely, but environmental protections, labor protections, consumer protections, we take money out of politics. We make bribing politicians a criminal offense. We make sure that all campaign funds are from a public pool. We'll come up with a formula for figuring how much money each type of position gets, but we can do that. We're smart. We can make sure that the corporations are not treated as people. We can make sure that money is not speech. And if we do these things, then we the people can counterbalance the corporations and the 1%ers that control them. But without those constraints upon our economic structures, the individual will always be politically and economically exploited by the wealthy. It is why libertarianism fails. You cannot stand toe-to-toe with the Ford Motor Company. You cannot stand toe-to-toe with any corporation. You can't even stand toe-to-toe with your average small business, because the small business owner still has a position of power. It's less than the corporation, like Ford Motor Company, but it is still a position of power. They can take away your job. And I don't know how many of you out there have ever been in a position where losing your job could mean that you lose everything. But it happens. And the only reason in America we have any kind of chance of surviving losing your job is because we have the safety net with the unemployment insurance. And that only exists because of liberal progressive politics. Remember, every single worker right, every worker's right out there you have in America that helps push that balance pan down and make you more equal to the Ford Motor Company was acquired through organized labor. A socialist concept, if there ever was one. Organized labor has acquired every right in America that a worker has. And people bled and died for them. But if we have economic constraints, if we are allowed to be, as a people, in control of the corporations, because that's more of us than them, then the political freedom is there. We can do what and say what we want. We could have the progressive social programs we need, the social safety net. We could have the freedoms that we deserve, that are our right as Americans. But it is not in the best interests of corporations for us to have any freedoms. They don't want us to have any political freedoms. They want to be able to exploit us at will. They want to strip us of all the rights that we have fought and died to acquire. Because it makes it more convenient. It makes it easier for them to exploit us. And the Tea Party and the GOP and the Libertarians all want to make that easier. They want to make sure that that balance pan will never budge. That no matter how many of us individuals get on it, the corporations will always possess more power, because we, the people, will no longer be able to function as a unit. We will just be individuals, divide and conquer, making sure that none of us have any power to stop them. And I'm gonna fight that. I do it through my vote. And sadly, the best I can do in a general election is vote Democrat against the GOP. Come this primary, I'm voting Bernie Sanders. I don't think Bernie Sanders will get the nomination. I really don't. I think it'll either go to Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. So I figure Joe Biden's probably going to get in the race. And I'll end up voting for whoever who's running for the Democrats, because the GOP cannot win anything. I do not trust the GOP to control the dog catcher's office. But political and American political and social conservatives are not equal. They're not the same. They're not just a flip side of being a liberal progressive socialist. Being what I am, what I believe, is about social and political freedoms, which can only be attained when we have the economic constraints and structure that will give us those freedoms, till we make sure we rein in the corporations and the 1% that control them. So Orson Scott Card is wrong on many, many levels in his novel and in his personal worldviews. And I hope that someday he comes to realize that. But in the meantime, I will fight him tooth and nail so that he does not gain an inch. And I freely admit, I occasionally have been known to send a message to the National Organization of Marriage and taunt them. But the worldviews of American conservatism and being a democratic socialist are not the same. They are not equal. They are not flip sides. My view of us is one of freedom. Their view is one of serfdom, of exploitation, forever, of